All right, guys. Are y'all ready? I show that you guys are flooding in right now. I'm seeing 39 of you coming in. I see a couple familiar faces. David Leslie, how are you? Chris Smith, thanks for joining us. Dave DeMera, no Dave. Guys, I've got about 30 seconds after 3. We're going to give it maybe one more minute. We actually had 700 people register for this, so this is going to be should have a good crowd. Obviously, an interesting topic, or a maybe not an interesting topic, but a near and dear to our hearts as builders and architects topics. We're talking dry foundations today. Myself, Jake Bruton, Adrian with Dörken, and we've got a behind the wall Dörken guy as well, Peter Barrett's on the call. We're going to give it like one more minute before we get started, y'all. So thanks for hanging out with us. I'm going to scroll through the attendee list, see how many
clicking in
more
quick.
of you. Yeah, they are. I'm seeing 150 so far. What's up, Andy Moore? How are you? Brian Edgar's on. There's an old time friend. Yeah, we got a bunch of people on here I recognize.
Matt Sneller that you introduced me to a few years ago. Matt?
Yeah, Matt's a Houston, Texas builder, longtime friend. Who else do I recognize on here? See any other names, Jake, you know?
Monticello Homes in Springfield. What's up, Jason?
What's up, Jason? How are you, man? We were talking the other day about some hardware. Yeah, we got a bunch of people. I'm seeing 160 on. Yeah, we got a ton of people I'm recognizing on here. Well, what do you think? Should we get started, Jake? We got
let's do it.
1 minute after. Okay,
they'll continue to pile in.
Yeah, they'll continue to pile in. Well, guys, thank you for joining us. Let me first introduce who's going to be on the webinar today, and then we'll get started. To my right, although I don't know what your screen looks like, let me introduce you first to Adrian Wagner. Adrian is with Dörken. You actually live in LA, right, Adrian?
Right in Los Angeles.
And I've actually seen you travel quite a bit, though, so you've been around the whole U.S. And yeah. Adrian, if you don't mind, I think your history and your story is fascinating. Will you give these guys a kind of a minute background on you, kind of where you got started in the industry and how you ended up with Dörken?
Sure. Well, actually, I started on another continent, and that is in Germany, Europe. I started as a roofer. My dad owns a construction business, and since I was 13 years old, I helped out working on construction site, basically cleaning all the scaffolds. And yeah, my big goal was to become a big guy like the employees of my dad always saw working on the roof. So I became a roofer myself, and that's why when I first came in contact with Dörken, as we went through very challenging times in the German construction market those days, where we got very strong and strict energy saving laws enacted. So basically we were forced to remodel all the old roof structures, put in insulation that caused all kinds of problems like moisture issues and air leakage problems. So Dörken was the first company who came up with the system to solve that problem. And from my experience, it solved not only a lot of moisture problems, but a lot of business problems, because what happened was the roofer did a new roof. He was forced to put in all that insulation, and all of a sudden we saw a lot of moisture problems. So the homeowners thought, hey, the roof is leaking, when in fact that was not the case. So during all that time, I grew up in the construction industry and got to know the company Dörken. And after I joined the master roofing school and became a master roofer, which is a requirement in Germany to found your own company, I got hired by Dörken as a technical consultant and worked closely with all the people in the industry before I got recently transferred 4 years ago to North America. I spent 1 year in our headquarters in Beamsville, Ontario in Canada, and studied all the building codes and regulations for Canada and North America and the US, which are quite different from Germany. And 2.5 years ago, I moved to Los Angeles, California, and I'm now the technical sales manager for Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas.
Man, that's awesome, Adrian. I think it's really cool that you have that background growing up in the industry and actually becoming a master roofer in Germany before joining with Dörken. I love that you've got that background. And similar to your background, Jake on your screen there also comes into the industry as a second generation. Not as, on the roofing side, but Jake's dad was a builder, grew up in the industry. Give us a quick background, Jake, on your company, Aero Builders, or
Sure.
Aero Building, sorry.
That's okay. You always do that.
No, I always do that. You got to change the name of your company.
So I've grown up in the industry. I've lived in Columbia, Missouri, basically my whole life. And when I started working for the company, I was 12 years old. You know, same sort of story. This is what we do in the summer. We go to work and help my father. And
Cool.
I always think, like, when someone says, "Oh, I helped my dad at 12," like, yeah, you were pushing a broom, but by the time I was 14, I was cutting roofs by myself. Like, I understood this thing, and it wasn't a complicated hip roof; it was a shed, but I still got to hand cut a roof by myself without any help. And so it's just always been something that I was gravitating towards. We all have that. Our dad is the hero when we're younger, and this is what my dad did, and I thought it was super exciting. And then in college, I got a degree in art and decided I wasn't going to be in building anymore, and then got suckered into coming back to the business for one job to help out. And then once that job was completed, my parents said, "Hey, we're going to sell the business." And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm the only employee." "Who are you selling it to?" And they're like, "You." And so then that was 2007, and I've been.
It was a great year to enter the business.
Yes, it was.
Smart.
It was perfect because I didn't have any adult-sized bills at that time, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, good point.
Since then, we've transitioned from almost entirely renovation and repair to mostly new construction with some renovation, some additions, and a little bit of repair work. But I think that growing up in the business, being mostly a renovation and repair contractor, really gave me a leg up when it came to new construction, because I have taken apart everything. I have fixed everything, and I have judged just about every method of construction that happens, and been able to go, yeah, I don't like that. I do like this. I don't like that. This doesn't work. This doesn't last. Those sorts of things. And it's given me the ability to feel like I can say we build durable homes.
Love it. So these guys in the panel with me, maybe 10 years younger, but they are thoroughly experienced. And I did not start at 12, but I've got, I'll kind of lead off the time today with some stories. I started the business as a 22-year-old and started with a national production builder. And that's really kind of where my story as a, sorry, I'm going to do my screen share here 1 second. That's really when my story starts today when it comes to leaky foundations and the problems that I encountered as a young builder. So here I was, 22 years old. I was starting with a national production builder. I'm going to show you some pictures of some houses that they're building today, which shockingly look a lot like the houses I was building with them 25 years ago. But I vividly remember my first encounter with today's topic, which was a foundation that had some problems. You guys can still see me, and can everyone see my screen? Give me a head nod, Jake. Okay, good. So here I was, 22 years old, on the job site, early in my first, 2 or 3 months of the job. And I was working in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. And at that time, every house was a full in-ground foundation. We used panelized, our concrete guy had these 8-foot panels with a brick stamping on these metal panels. So when he poured the foundation and pulled them, they looked like a brick, facade foundation. And then shortly after he pulled those panels, really the next day, the foundation damp proofing company would come, and they had this black tarry spray that they'd spray in the foundation, and they smelled terrible. And then he would drape some visqueen, some clear visqueen over top of it, and then we'd backfill. That's not true. We did have a sump, a French drain to an interior sump pump, and we'd backfill with 1 load of crushed gravel, no filter fabric, and then we'd backfill with whatever dirt we had available. So our idea of waterproofing, or my idea of waterproofing as a 22-year-old was, oh, we spray this black stuff and then we put plastic around the foundation. And I remember getting a homeowner question one time, like, well, what are we going to do to make sure my foundation doesn't leak? And I was thinking, God, where is my superintendent so he can explain this? I really have no idea what to say we're doing. I think that's exactly how I explained it. Well, you know, this guy's going to come in and he's going to spray this really smelly stuff on the outside. But the thing is, we're going to drape the house in plastic, and that's really going to keep the water out of your basement. I'm not sure how well I convinced her, but at the time I was this brainwashed 22-year-old. I thought for sure that would be fine. So the rainy season starts. I think I started with them in, July or August, right after graduating from college. The rainy season starts in the fall, and almost immediately I start getting these pager phone calls. You remember, anyone in the audience? I wish I could say raise hands. Anyone remember pager days? Jake, are you even old enough to have had a pager?
I remember when my dad got a pager for the business. That's how old.
All right. So for those of you who don't know what a pager looks like, it's nothing like this. It's this screen that's about this big, and there's only numbers at the top. And you carry it in your hip, and you think you're so cool because you have this pager, and it goes off, and it had a number for the office in -911, which meant stop whatever you're doing and get the heck to a phone immediately because there's a problem. So it'd been raining on the job site that day. It's like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm getting ready to go home. I get this 911 call from the office, and I get back to the job trailer. I'm in a job trailer now. It probably looked a lot like this, where we actually had a landline. I get on the phone. It's the office calling. Mrs. Smith has a flooded basement. So I get over there, and again, I'm like as green as bright green can be, as green as the zip sheathing on your job. I have no idea what to tell this lady or what to do. I'm like, is the sump pump plugged in? I don't know what to do. We flooded her whole house. She's a nightmare. I'm a mess. I don't know what to do. Finally, another older superintendent comes, brings a trash pump. We start pumping out her basement through a window. We end up taking all her carpet outside the next day. I mean, it was like burned in my brain. What a nightmare this was. But interesting enough, that production builder I built with never really changed their building practices for years. And we just kind of lived with the fact that we were going to get callbacks on wet basements. And some of them were real bad and some of them weren't bad at all. But, Jake did a great video not too long ago. And here's a good kind of quick explanation of it. There's a bunch of ways you can get water in your foundation, right? If you look at this diagram, you've got rainwater. You've got water that's going to run down the side of your house. You've got potentially water draining from your grass, which could be uphill from your house. You've got number 5 on there, which is your subsurface moisture. That could be groundwater. That could be water because your sump pump's not working. There's a million ways that water can get into your basement. And here's just a few of them. It's like there's 100 ways to go wrong, but yet there's only a couple ways to do it right. And it's really not rocket science. We're going to get into this today. Someone's saying to zoom in a little bit. How's that? Can y'all see that a little better? There's not a ton to it, but the war stories are endless. Let's think about how moisture actually goes through concrete, though, because if you think about it, you've got this giant, very expensive poured concrete wall. How does the water actually get through? There's really just 3 methods. Hydrostatic pressure is one of the main ways. That's like, think about if you had a bathtub or your boat in the lake, and you put some weight in that bathtub or that boat, and your drain plug in the boat wants to pop out and water to flood into your engine bay on your boat. That's basically hydrostatic pressure, that pressure of the water building up on the outside of your foundation, and any gap or crack is going to let that water in. Then there's capillary action. That's basically what happens when you suck water through a straw. That's that water that kind of wicks through those things. And that happens a lot in our foundations because our foundations crack. They have small voids. They have cold joints between your footings and your walls that come on top of them. And then there's also another form of water, which is even more insidious that we have to think about, which is vapor diffusion. If you look at a concrete sidewalk after a rain, you realize, oh, that concrete gets wet. And then the sun comes out and the top layer of that concrete dries pretty quickly, but the concrete has soaked up quite a bit of that moisture. And vapor and liquid water can diffuse through concrete. And so we end up needing vapor barriers and other ways to make sure that that wet concrete's not going to end up getting through our basements. Let's look at the hydrostatic pressure real quick too. You know, when it rains and that rainwater comes up on the side of our houses through the grade that's right next to our house, that water is exerting pressure. Now, this is a simple drawing with some with a block foundation, and block foundations are very prone to hydrostatic pressure issues because you've got miles of joints on them. But poured concrete walls are really no different. You know, you've got that joint between your footer and your wall, and walls often crack. It's pretty normal to see cracked foundation walls. The old adage that Jake's dad taught me in every old timer in construction was there's two types of concrete, son. There's concrete that's cracked, and there's concrete that's gonna crack. How many times did your dad tell you that when you were growing up, Jake?
Yes.
My dad never did because he wasn't in construction, but I guarantee you every old timer taught me that on the first part of the job. So we're going to get into a couple methods and even a couple Dörken products, but we want to be helpful to you whether you buy Dörken products or not on this webinar. So if you're taking notes, I actually don't have a slide on this, but there's really I think there's three keys or three things you need to do to make a dry foundation. And we're going to address the first one, draining down. We want to make sure that any water that comes up against our foundation always has a spot to drain down. And we've talked about dimple mats a ton. In fact, if you haven't seen Jake's video on dimple mats that he did not too long ago on Build Show Network, I'm stealing basically most of my presentation from Jake's video. Fantastic video. Dimple mats and the ability to drain down is one of the most vital and important things to make sure we can do. And this Delta MS is really an incredibly simple but effective product for basement waterproofing. This is a dimple mat type product. You can see it looks kind of egg crate shaped, and it's going to give us the ability to put an air gap so that water that's coming up against our foundation is going to be able to drain down and fall down into that French drain system in that cavity. I can't remember the exact material. Adrian, do you remember the type of?
It's made out of high density polyethylene, and the special thing about that, I have a sample here where I can try to explain.
Oh yes.
What the special thing about this material is, because there are a lot of dimple membranes out there in the market, but this was basically the first one developed in Germany in the late 70s, early 80s, and introduced to North America in the 90s. But what you find out if you compare different membranes to each other is that a lot of membranes, when you try to bend them, they're gonna crack. And that's why the material is too stiff. In the Delta MS system is developed in a way that we have a 60% recycled material on the inside and on the core of that membrane, and on the outside where you see that chocolate brown color, that is 40% virgin material, and that does two things. It protects the core membrane, and it gives the membrane this flexible property that allows you to bend it around the walls. And that makes a huge difference, especially in low temperature applications. When you're going to install it by 0 degrees Fahrenheit and you have a stiff membrane, that's going to explode like dynamite. Not with this membrane. You can bend it in every temperature, and that is actually one of the great benefits of this membrane.
Good. I appreciate that, Adrian. Before I go on, I do want to mention, by the way, and I should have said this earlier, if you have questions as we're going, hit the Q&A button on your screen, depending on which version of Zoom you're using. It's going to say Q&A somewhere, and I'll be monitoring those. I may actually pop in during the webinar on those, but we're going to leave at least 20 minutes at the end for nothing but Q&A, because I know a bunch of you have some questions And by the way, several of you emailed ahead with some questions, so we're going to make sure we answer those in just a minute. But back to this first of the 3 Ds, as I call them, drain down. This is that first kind of line of defense, making sure that when we get water near our foundation, we're going to be able to drain it down. So let's take a look. This is kind of the original method that Matt Reisinger did as a 22-year-old. There's that little black line on the outside of that wall there, if you can see it as I zoom in. That's some damp proofing that's applied not long after the concrete's poured. And the problem with that is when you get any kind of crack, the only second line of defense we had at that time was some 6 mil poly or some visqueen on the outside of the house to possibly bridge those cracks and hopefully get that water to drain down. But as you all know, some really thin 6 mil product, it's not doing much, and it's really easy for that to get broken on the job. But if you look at the diagram on the right here with the Delta MS or another Diplomat for that matter, it's going to give us the ability to bridge and make sure that water doesn't have that hydrostatic pressure. Now the foundation crack is still there, right? We didn't fix the crack. We didn't span the crack with a membrane. But what we did was we eliminated the hydrostatic pressure. We've eliminated that force of the water or the capillary action to make that water go through. So if you look at this diagram, there's still water on the inside of the wall, on the inside potentially of the Diplomat. Now there's hopefully a lot less of it, but water could still get in there and you still would not have a leak when you've got this drain and down kind of membrane happening here. And next, really the other two, there's really just 3 things here, guys. Drain down is number 1. Keep dry is number 2. And on this particular image, this is straight off the Dörken website and their literature. In this case, they're not even using another membrane behind that. And in fact, a lot of builders are going just with this method. This is your only waterproofing, is this Diplomat. Now we're going to show you in a minute, they're installing it in a way that really prevents water from getting through it. But that air gap is doing the heavy lifting. And then, of course, super, super important is at the bottom there, you've got the 3rd D, which is drain out. We've got a French drain system. We've got filter fabric. That French drain is going to come to a sump pump where we can pump that water out. And a system like this, very, very straightforward, but incredibly, incredibly effective. Let's keep going and let's talk a little bit more about Delta MS and also some even further methods than just using Delta MS. Now, for using Delta MS, we need to make sure that it's going past whatever walls we're using. So if you have a garage stem wall that comes in, that's, for instance, not going to get a below grade area, we need to make sure that this Delta MS goes past that. We're also going to make sure that we've got that perimeter drain. But here you can see on this image, we've got the Delta MS draped over top of the footing, so we can make sure that we've got the air gap. And then they're going to install the French drain and backfill it, like you can see on this drawing on the right. So there's your Diplomat. The Diplomat then is going to drape over top of where the French drain is going to be, which is right at the base of the footer. And then you're going to have both the gravel and a good filter fabric on top of that.
So Matt, can we think about the, in this case, Delta MS as being a rain screen for my below grade assembly and it's leading to my gutter system?
Yes, Jake. In fact, your video made some really good points on that. As we think about foundation waterproofing, go watch Jake's video. I wonder if Brian could put a link up there for us, Brian, if you're listening. But we need to think about from the very top of the building, from the first place water is going to hit your roof. We need to think about foundation drainage. That's your roofing material draining to your gutters, which are then draining away from your foundation, whether that's a simple splash block or a more complex system. We want to get that water that's coming off our roof down to our gutters away from our foundation. We want to make sure that that water is not coming downhill towards our house, for instance. When you put swales in our landscaping, we really want that water to stay away from our foundation to begin with. And just like we rain screen our claddings so that there's no capillary action, on the outside. That's, you know, before we put our hardy plank on, we're putting those 1-bys on. The same is true for your foundation. Great point, Jake. And in this particular case, this rollout membrane is pretty straightforward. Here's a couple images from the brochure, and I actually have some from some job sites here in a second. But basically, you're going to roll it out. A 2-man crew could install this in probably just a few hours, even on a very big foundation. Now, you notice there's a black, almost like a termination bar. I think they call it a cove. Is that the correct term, Adrian, from the Dörken catalog?
Yeah, it's the mold strip, and it basically will prevent debris from getting behind the membrane and clogging the drainage.
Yep, that's right. And then they're just going to nail it on the foundation with a cap that's going to fit into those dimples. And then you see he's got a gas actuated nail gun. Now, remember, you are penetrating the wall with that nail gun. We're going to try and do that towards the top of the wall where there's less possibility of capillary action or something happening in the future. You don't have a lot of those fasteners towards the bottom of the wall, but this is going to hold it on. And because we've got that air gap, we don't have those future problems. There it is right there. It's called a Delta fastener. And then Delta flash is what they're talking about for the top strip. And then wherever you're lapping the Delta MS, I'm not sure what the roll length is. It's probably like 75 feet a roll or 50 feet a roll. We're going to do a lap sealant, and we're going to overlap those rolls by several inches to make sure that we're lapped properly at those locations. Now, interestingly enough, forward 25 years, these images, these next few images are actually of that builder I worked for when I was a 22-year-old, and now I'm 48. So this was 25 years ago. They have totally changed their basement waterproofing. And that national builder that I worked for, that I told you had all those callbacks all those years ago, they're exclusively using Delta MS now on their job sites. So even though they've got really basic house wrap, they're not doing very expensive homes, they've changed to use this. It's actually 65 feet per roll of Delta MS. And so this is actually from a production builder. I'll try to not name their name. You have no idea which builder this is based on this photo. But this is all Delta MS on this house that I saw under construction, which is actually right near my parents' house outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. All right, let's transition to a couple of install photos of Delta MS, and then I'm going to move to some Q&A with Adrian and Jake. Here's just a few detail shots to show you.
That's great work.
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively straightforward. And the cool part about this is you don't need a big spray rig. You don't need a lot of tools. We're talking about a caulk gun. The most expensive tool is the nail gun that's going to nail these caps on. Other than that, it's really straightforward. It's very quick. You can do it while your foundation concrete is green. You don't need to wait till it's cured. And you could be putting your drain tile in and backfilling pretty darn quickly after you strip your forms.
Matt, can I interject real quick about the fasteners in that system?
Please do. Yeah, please do.
You made note like we are penetrating our whatever waterproofing is also behind per se with a fastener. Now, that kind of panics people, and even on our job sites, we try to hold those to the upper half. You don't have to fasten it completely to the wall because you're going to backfill it, and you're going to have thousands of pounds of dirt and gravel that are going to hold it in place. But I think that we also have to not panic about those fasteners overall, because it's kind of no different than nailing siding onto a house. We are penetrating our WRB or our you know, and so as long as we don't pull that fastener back out, it's not a hole. That's it's a hole that's been filled by a nail. So we have to remember that, you know, I know that I've had talked to builders about systems like this, and they've said, well, yeah, but then you have to nail it on. And it's like, well, yes, you do. You're holding it in place while they backfill, and we're going to do as few as we need necessary. But as long as you don't pull the nails out, that hole's still filled. So it's not that big a concern.
Yeah, and you are exactly right. It's the same approach like a rain screen system, right? You're going to nail your siding on or your cladding on as well. And you have those orange fasteners that interlock into those dimples. And then you still have that air gap technology. So everything that goes past that membrane is going to be drained down by by this air gap technology. So even if water comes behind that or through that, which is very rare, it's going to be it's going to flow down and then drained away.
Yep, it's pressure relief.
Great point. Great point. All right, so I've spent a few minutes talking about the 3Ds. Remember, drain down, keep it dry, and drain out. Let me talk about your experiences, Adrian and Jake, with these types of systems and how you put these together. So first off, Jake, we didn't spend a lot of time, or I didn't spend any time talking about some other waterproofing systems, but Delta MS, or really whatever dimple mat you decide to, in this case, Delta MS, we're kind of talking about that as an all-in-one system, but you would, just like I do, like a good belt and suspenders. Talk to me about how else we could waterproof the concrete before we put that Delta MS on.
Yeah, I think that conversation for me actually starts with more of like my history in the building industry. Like I said before, I've lived in Columbia or in and around Columbia the majority of my life. We have very expansive clay soils, and we are a basement market. So you really get a lot of walkouts, a lot of pit basements. The 60s ranch that I live in right now is a pit basement. I think I counted the other day, I think I've lived in either 6 or 7 basements my entire life. And the one that I lived in first in my life is the only one that was watertight. All the rest of them had a sump pump or interior mat to drain to a drainage channel around the perimeter or something of the sort. Even the 60s ranch that I live in now, that I've done incredible work to manage the water on the outside with gutters and grading and things like that, I still have 2 sump pumps, and I still get every once in a while a tiny little amount of water in. But that's because I'm not going to put in the money to dig up the foundation to waterproof it, to deal with 1 hand towel's worth of water once a year. And so that's how I approach basements. I don't want to have a client call me and tell me that there's water in their basement. I don't want to have that pager call. So we're not just going for damp proofing. Even we think that the dimple mat is an integral part of every below grade system that we're putting in. Even if you're choosing any brand, MS is a fantastic system, but you have to partner. We would recommend that you partner that with a waterproofing membrane on the wall, which could be a bitumen based coating. There are other manufacturers, other coatings out there that are all great. And then you also get to include the dimple mat as a means of protecting that waterproofing too.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is like,
so you could use a fluid applied, you could use a sheet applied, and I've seen you use both on your jobs as well as I have.
Yep. And it's never going to be more cost effective to put it in than the day that the foundation is stripped. It's only ever going to be more expensive to replace that, to work on that, to deal with those problems. And you couldn't pick a worse place to have to do a repair. 8 feet down, 9 feet down below grade. Like,
boy, that's for sure.
Who wants to do that in the first place? So this is one of those places where when we have conversations with clients, I'm like, no, this is what we do. And they go, okay, well, is there any place we can save money? Yeah, you can hire somebody that doesn't do these things and have a basement that leaks, and then spend the money 10 years from now instead of now.
No, that's a whole nother conversation about not cutting your legs out from underneath you as a builder and trying to save money on anything that has anything to do with water. There should be a non-negotiable. You should figure out, as the builder, architect, expert, what system you're going to use, because it's your liability. They're going to call you when there's a problem. So you should absolutely not save on this. In fact, you should go to the next bomber system than what you've used it in the past, probably.
And any builder that says, well, I give a 1-year warranty because that's the HBA rule or something like that. You should also know what the state of repose is in your state. In my state, it's 10 years. So I own that building for more than a decade. If I did something wrong and it causes a problem, they have the right to come to me. So why not protect myself as well as know that my clients are going to be happy?
Same with us in Texas. We're 10 years liable, and there's kind of a 2-year
grace period to get the suit in.
Grace period. So we got basically it's 12 years. Anything you build, you're on the hook for 12 years. Adrian, Dörken also makes some other dimple mat materials, including some with some filter fabric on it. Do you have a sample of those, by the way, with you? Could you give us kind of the rundown between Delta MS and what Delta Drain might be used for?
Yes, and my personal experience is I always hated to work in foundations or basements, especially with fluid applied materials. And you know, now I live in California and I'm blessed with good weather, but Germany is a whole different game. I mean, we get rain every day, and that's a big challenge for fluid applied or even torture materials. You have a very limited space. You deal with a lot of moisture anyway. And oftentimes, I mean, 6 months of the year, we have temperatures below most application temperatures for fluid applied products. So what we ended up doing anyway is protecting all our waterproofing and foundation walls with a drainage or a protection board. And that would look like that. It's basically the same dimple structure, but with a filter fabric on the top side of the dimples. So when Delta MS is installed against the foundation walls with the dimples facing that wall, the Delta Drain system is installed the other way around. So the dimples and the geotextile is facing the soil. And what it does, it basically separates the waterproofing membrane from the soil and provides a drainage space in this layer. So what we figured out is, okay, wait a minute, when we have to waterproof our foundation walls and then we have to install a dimple mat or protection board anyway, why can we not just use the dimple board and we are good to go? And that's where a Delta MS basically comes from. So for higher applications or for commercial applications, this product, Delta Drain, would be the way to go. And I just recently, last year, finished one of the largest construction projects here in Southern California, in San Diego, where we went 10 stories below grade, not with the Delta Drain, but we have similar products. They are more reinforced, and we protected that construction structure 10 stories below grade with a product like that. Should just drain away the groundwater and protect the waterproofing.
That's awesome. Guys, I'm seeing we've already got 37 questions to answer.
Okay.
I had a feeling this might happen. I had 2 or 3 more questions for each one of you, but let's pivot here and start answering some of the Q&A, because I know we've got a bunch of people that this is a very near and dear topic to them. So let's start scrolling through a couple of the Q&A, and I'll throw those out to you guys. First, let's start with this one's for you, Adrian. Mark Duffy says, if a dimple mat has textile fabric on it, which way should it face, the wall or the dirt backfill? So in other words, that product you just showed us, which way are we facing?
So the geotextile, the fabric faces the soil.
Yep. Yeah, the textile always faces the soil.
I hope you can see that here. Yeah. That's where the drainage happens.
Jake, here's one for you. On a cinder block foundation, when using Delta MS, let's say if you're waterproofing that cinder block foundation, would you still need to waterproof the foundation walls, or could you use just Delta MS? That's Karen Sonics answering that question.
Yes, I think the thing to remember is that the Delta MS does qualify as damp proofing per code. So you, by code, can get away with just damp proofing in most situations. I think you have to balance budget and site conditions. For us, we know that we have expansive soil and we do get a fair amount of rain. So for us, we're always doing what we consider to be a waterproof instead of just damp proof. But, you know, if you're building in Arizona and you're not worried about groundwater, there's no reason why damp proofing isn't completely appropriate for you, especially on a 4-foot stem wall.
Yeah.
And I think it's also regulated by the municipalities, right? The code requirement for that region.
Yep.
So that needs to be considered as well.
Adrian, here's one for you. Ken Wallen says, how well does the dimple mat work with extreme cold temperatures in the north underground?
It works very well. As I said, the combination of virgin and recycled material makes it so special. Well, if you have a regular dimple mat, there are a lot of products out there that you can find in different places. They crack soon when it gets colder, but the Delta MS system can be installed up to minus 22 Fahrenheit. So it can get really cold. And even then, It's just not recommended to install any material below that, but I never experienced any problems with cold temperature so far. It's very flexible and durable.
Yeah. I just did a screen share because Andreas had a question about sewers, you know, a hung sewer that's going through your foundation, a water line, that sort of thing. Here's an image of how that's working with the Delta MS system. And basically you're going to use, gosh, Adrian, remind me of the sealant. It's not Delta-thene, it's called Delta Sealant. There you go. Thank you. So what you're seeing there is Delta Sealant around those penetrations through the wall. And then we're overlapping the Delta MS and basically making a punched opening in there. And then you're also going to see where this, on the left-hand side there, where it comes into that wall, because it's flexible, it's turning the corner, and then they've got the cove membrane to basically termination, to terminate it so that dirt is not going to get into that left-hand side. That's a textbook install right there.
Right, and the dimples are interlocking into each other, so you can overlap that 6 inches or even further like that, and have kind of a sealing around every penetration or pipe penetration, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's right. Let's go. I actually want to show a few more pictures in a second. Let me show a couple more. Let's get through a couple more questions here. Let's see. Okay, we answered Andreas. Sorry. Thank you, Andreas. Great question. By the way, we're answering off Q&A. If you have a question for the crew here, drop it on the Q&A. Dimple towards the stem wall or facing out from the stem wall? Bradley Peterson. You want to take that one, Adrian? Or that's pretty straightforward. Dimples are always towards the concrete. Anytime you've got a dimple membrane, like Delta MS, the dimples face the wall, so the air gap is in front of the wall.
Right, and the good thing is the way it unrolls from the road is the way it goes onto the building. So when you unroll the Delta MS, it unrolls like that. So you can place it, you can place the roll against the foundation wall and just unroll it, and you have the right installation. So. Yeah.
All right, now we're gonna open up a little bit of a can of worms on this question. But Stephen Jorls says, by the way, sorry for butchering your name, Stephen. I'm sure that's not how you pronounce it. With perimeter insulation installed on the exterior of the wall, would the Delta MS be installed inboard or outboard of the rigid insulation? Jake, you made a fantastic video on making a case for interior insulation rather than exterior insulation. Will you answer this question and also give us the 5-minute version of the case for insulation on the inside?
Yeah, so if you have to put your insulation on the outside, it's outboard of the dimple mat, because the dimple mat still has to be there to relieve that water pressure on the foundation. You take a bit of a hit because you have a void in between your insulation and your concrete, but that void doesn't lead to any open air, so it's not like a real traditional hit like you would think if you had a rain screen and then insulation and then siding or something. So it's perfectly acceptable to put it on before the insulation. In fact, that's the way you got to do it, because you're relieving the pressure. It does nothing if it's on the outside of the insulation, or very little. The idea that you brought up, Matt, is I'm going to make an argument that we're going to put all of our insulation on the inside of our foundation. I understand that renovation work might be different, but if we have access to both sides, I think that there is no reason to bury something on the outside of the foundation that's difficult to protect, that then makes it impossible to inspect our foundation or to repair the insulation. By moving it inboard of your concrete walls, you have access to it from then on. And even if you want to say we covered it up with wood framing and drywall, that's easier access than digging on the outside of a foundation and redoing landscaping. And it's protected. It's not an environment for bugs to live. It's not an environment for any sort of pest to live. And now I can visually inspect the exposed part of my foundation on the outside.
And that's that video is probably what, 10-12 minutes in length that you made, Jake, and it totally changed my thoughts on interior versus outside insulation. The other point that you made in that video that we don't have time to get into, but I'll mention briefly is anytime you've got insulation out in the dirt, you've got bugs, you've got insects, you've got things that are going to eat it and be exposed to. So consider bringing that inside. What a difference it can make in how you're going to treat that insulation. Jake, here's a question that I think you're well suited to answer. Joseph Warner says he's building a house in Hawaii, basically. The land is a 4 and 12 slope on clay soil. Last year, he got 38 inches of rain in 2 days. He thinks that will become the norm. What can he do to prevent washout below the foundation besides the French drain?
Well, working on uncompacted soil like we're supposed to is probably the best way to prevent that washout, but managing the water at the surface level is by far the best thing that you can do, because if no surface water is getting down there, then you have no effects down there. That and build on stilts.
Yeah.
38 inches of rain a year is a lot.
That's crazy. I mean, the other thing I would say is look at indigenous architecture. Like when I traveled through Switzerland last year, you think of the iconic Swiss house as being a house with 5-foot overhangs. Well, all the new houses also have 5-foot overhangs because they look to the past and go, grandpa didn't have all these membranes and all these, doodads and fancy stuff. So instead, grandpa used a 5-foot overhang to protect the building. And they still do that today all the time. The houses that I saw that were brand new, 5-6-foot overhangs. Takes some engineering and takes some forethought. But if you have a giant golf umbrella, it's not as important to have a raincoat that's zipped up perfectly and every rip and tear is perfect, because this golf umbrella is just sending that water way away from the house. So you might consider that in a crazy rainy climate too. I mean, like at my personal build, I put 2-foot overhangs everywhere. And then on my gable ends where I didn't have a 2-foot overhang, I took some vulnerable windows and made awnings for them. Thinking about it from the roof perspective when we think about foundation waterproofing is vital. Let's spend another minute on exterior insulation and foundations, because I'm seeing several questions on that. Adrian or Jake, and I can answer this too. If people are interested in exterior insulation, talk to me about what you've done with the dimple mat and exterior insulation, fastening that exterior insulation, how much you might use. Do you want to take that one, Jake?
No, because I have not put and I don't put insulation on the outside. Yeah, I haven't since the 90s. Yeah.
I've done a fair amount of exterior insulation in the past. And in fact, let me grab, I'm going to be fumbling here for 2 seconds, people. Sorry, but on my photos, I put together some photos of I did a video on a full Delta install, I don't know, about 2-3 years ago now. My photos are not working. I'm sorry. I'm on my iPad today. Forget it. Cancel. We'll come back to that. Oh, shoot. Not only that, but I've just locked up my computer. I can't get to Q&A anymore. Adrian, with 12 minutes left, will you be our Q&A moderator since my buttons are not working all of a sudden?
I'm just reading a question. Adrian, are the building standards in Germany more stringent? And I think it depends on what part of the building we're talking about. I know for sure that the residential roof codes in Germany are way more heavy, and they are enforced, as we have kind of a Green New Deal going on in Germany for about 10 years now. So every building that gets more than 20% of its surface renovated, it has to meet the newest energy code. So it has to be treated as a new construction. That means you have all those old structures, and they have to be very well insulated and airtight. And that comes with all kinds of challenges, because oftentimes you have combined structures where one old roof goes into another old house, or it interjects or interferes with each other. And that was and is quite a challenge to manage all that. And we saw a lot of problems with old roof structures or old structures in general that were perfectly fine for hundreds of years. And as soon as we started to insulating them and putting in insulation, we saw all of a sudden moisture problems. So yes, I think there's a big challenge with the codes and what we have to do in Europe, Germany. But I see those developments even here in California, and I think in Texas as well. It's getting more and more stringent about air tightness goals and targets, right, Matt?
Yeah, that's right, for sure. My Q&A is working again all of a sudden. Zoom decided to let me back.
Okay.
We've got about 10 minutes left, guys. Let's keep going on a couple of these Q&As because I'm seeing we've got 42 open questions.
I have one, Matt, that I see that Alexander asked that I want to answer. It's do they have a solution for partial walkouts? Basically, I think that if you're going to install, a walkout's very common in our market. So we're still waterproofing and using dimple mat on the below grade section, and we're just stopping it short of the point where the pressure isn't an issue, where the ground changes. We've taken specifically the dimple mat with the termination bar at an angle and down as the grade changes, and we've actually taken it around a corner and onto that wing wall of the foundation before as well. So we're just dealing with the part that's below grade. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that's right.
Don't be afraid to terminate it where you terminate it, and don't forget to lap onto old foundations when you're tying in either.
Speaking of terminating that, we've gotten several questions about how far up do you take it, and someone even said, "Hey, how do we deal with brick ledges and that sort of thing?" Let me take that question. It was specifically Benjamin McCall that said, "How much is typically left exposed above grade?" You don't want to leave it exposed above grade. Any type of plastic material, no matter what it is going to have a UV lifespan. And so we want to terminate it just below grade. Figure out where your final grade is, mark that on the foundation. A couple of dots of spray paint will work so that the waterproofer knows how far to go up. And then you saw on my photos, when that dimple mat comes up, you're going to put a termination or a cove on that. Dörken sells a black one that you can buy from them that you're going to pin nail on. But if you didn't want to use that, you could also use stainless 24 gauge bent sheet metal that would act as a term bar. All you're trying to do is get water that might be running down the foundation, not to include dirt coming down into those channels. And you want to terminate that just below grade, ideally just a couple inches below grade, so that above grade, you just have concrete foundation showing. There's a bunch of reasons why you want concrete foundation showing. Especially a big one is termites. Termite tunnels are going to be coming up from the outside. You want to see those tunnels. You want to inspect those tunnels. And if you have insulation in the way, if you have other things in the way, you're not going to be able to see that. So that's why Jake's arguments for inside below grade insulation make a lot of sense to me, because then I can see everything on the outside. I'm not trying to stucco over exterior insulation or other details. I don't have to worry about bugs or other issues below grade with that. Now I've got concrete showing. And then also, if you've got a brick ledge, a brick lug, a stone lug on the outside of the house, I hate to say it, but you really want some concrete showing beneath that brick lug as well. No one likes it. It's hard to sell to your homeowners, but anytime we bring our dirt up to our brick or bury our brick below, you're going to have problems later. So you really, if you're going to do brick or stone on the outside of the house, and it's a traditional facade like most American buildings that are made from wood, you want 6 or 8 inches of concrete foundation showing. Some really good questions. Adrian or Jake, you guys see any other good ones there that would work for you guys? Lots of good questions.
I just saw one from Karen that Karen is in Alberta, Canada, and the temperature goes below, or it goes below 30 degrees Celsius. And that's very cold, but it's still in the temperature range. So minus 30 degrees Celsius is still in the temperature range for the installation of Delta MS or Delta Drain. So it even can be done in those temperatures.
Good luck finding somebody that wants to do that.
Right, that's a challenge.
Man, that's for sure. That's brutal.
Somebody asked, with expansive soils, will the mat delaminate from the concrete? And I would say if it's
Oh,
mechanically fastened, no, but if it does, it's still held in place by soil. So as long as the two are still there, you still get the effect. And even if the soil pulls slightly and the mat has a little bit of wiggle room, that's just bigger dimple mat at that point.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you just increased your void. That's all.
Here's a great question that I think is a one that comes up a lot. If you have an insulated concrete form foundation, do you still need Delta MS or Delta Drain? And the answer is absolutely. I think that people have this misconception that ICF buildings, including foundations, are like naturally waterproof and don't have problems. And I can tell you, incidentally, I've gotten a million emails, phone calls, 911 calls for help for buildings that are ICF built that have some water intrusion issues. So treat your ICF building the exact same way you would your wood building that's more sensitive to moisture, right? It's not as big a deal if your concrete gets wet in the core of your ICF, but your clients are not going to be happy, nor will you if it's your house. So yes, you absolutely want to follow the 3Ds on your ICF house. You want a drainage, you want to drain down, you want to use something like Delta MS or Delta Dry. You want to use a waterproofing membrane on there, and you want to make sure you've got a good French drain. Treat it just like you would a standard concrete foundation. We've got time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. You guys see anything that would be a good one on here?
Can it be used on a rubble foundation, Adrian?
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, I think it can. Can be used on a rubble foundation. What do you think, Matt?
I would say yes. The hard part is going to be attaching it. You know, how do you attach anything to a rubble foundation?
Mm-hmm.
And
But
you
still,
probably
why
would
not?
want to. Yeah, no, you absolutely could. I think you're just gonna have to take a little more care and backfill too, especially in a rubble
Mm-hmm.
foundation. And I'm assuming this is a retrofit application. Not too many people are building rubble foundations for new builds. So my guess is this is a 100-year-old house that's getting remodeled. But you could drill the rock itself and use a concrete anchor, right? You could use a Tapcon screw right into the rock itself with those same orange anchors that mount right into the nipples of the Delta MS. So yeah, it would work great for that. Be careful on backfill though. And definitely opt for interior insulation on a rubble foundation, because a closed cell spray foam could actually help you structurally on a rubble foundation. You guys may have heard of a guy that the 3 of us look up to, named Joe Stiebrick, famous building scientist, probably the godfather of modern building science. Jake and I have been in his crawl space before. He has a rubble foundation with I don't know, a 4-foot crawl space and lots of wine refrigerators, and he's got, I don't know, Jake, what, 4 inches of closed cell foam down there? Yep. Something like that.
Yep.
And his foundation's how old? I can't remember what his house is.
Yeah, the house is like 150. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's got a rubble foundation that he did a dimple mat of some variety on the outside, closed cell foam on the inside, and a sump pump, and it's a beautiful retrofit on an incredibly old house. Guys, we are running with about 1 minute left. Let me just say thanks, and let's talk about where you could find some help in the future. Jake has made several great videos on buildshownetwork.com. I've made several videos on both Build Show Network and YouTube that you guys can access on this. One great plug I want to give you for my friends at Dörken. I've been friends with several people at Dörken since I met them at Building Science Summer Camp. They have a head guy named Marcus that I met almost 10 years ago now, and was telling him maybe about these incredibly bomber German products that they were starting to sell in America, 15 years ago. And I was mesmerized by how high quality they were, that, these commercial grade products were available for us residential builders. And I've been using their products and talking to their people for years. Adrian is just one of a bunch of reps that are available for you to ask questions. So if you have questions, if you're thinking about using them, if you want to know where you can find this, reach out to them, and you're going to get a response. They have really, really good people, and they have really bomber products. Most of them are made now in Ontario. So they're made in North America, and they've got some really, really fantastic people, including Adrian, who grew up as a roofer, as a master roofer, and now is helping you as a tech rep on your jobs. How cool is that? Not, hey, I used to rep for Nabisco last week selling Frito-Lay stocking crackers, and now I'm the rep for this company. Freaking Adrian was a German roofer, and his dad started the company. I mean, this is the kind of tech reps that we're talking about when you have a company as solid as Dörken. So thank you, Adrian, for all of your great support over the years and for sponsoring this webinar. Hopefully you guys learned something. This is being taped. If you want to send this to your architect, to your builder, to your friend, to Steve Basic, who would probably learn some stuff, or Jake, just to rewatch himself, there'll be a link that will come back to you. And I think we had like 700 registered, 300 or so in attendance. If for your friends who registered but couldn't make it, a client meeting popped up, they'll get a recording on this. And I think it'll also be available on buildshownetwork.com as well. Any final thoughts, Adrian or Jake, before we shut this down?
Well, I want to thank you, Matt, and Jake. Matt, I watched every of your shows, even back in Germany, and I think you're growing a fan base all over the world. You're doing a great job, and we are really thankful for having you on the team and being supportive of our products and working together with you. And Jake, likewise, you're a great guy, and thank you for your expertise and help.
Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, man, I mean, quick nerdy plug for Jake. I've learned so much about airtightness and good construction practices. This is a guy that wears the tool belt 1 minute and then writes an article for Fine Home Building the next minute. He's always willing to share. And he's 10 years younger than I am. And yet I feel like half the time he's 10 years smarter than I am. So huge thank you for Jake spending an hour with us today. And thank you guys for joining us on this webinar. Signing off from a WKP job site trailer where I'm visiting in Rhode Island. There's the job site to-do list. There's his air conditioner on a hot Rhode Island day. There's Chris, the project manager's computer right here. I had a nice little spot to do my webinar while I'm traveling into Rhode Island. You guys have a great day. We'll see you next time on the Build Show or something like that.